So speaking of people using their religion to make laws, you may have recall that last year Roe v. Wade was overturned, due in large part to the continued action of the religious right in America. And since that happened, some groups have been working to reverse the reversal, and that group includes the Satanic Temple. You may know them from their fights to put statues of Baphomet outside of government buildings. They are arguing that this decision violates their religious freedoms. They say that abortion rights are part of their fundamental tenets of their religion, specifically that one's body is inviolable, subject to one's will alone. So they've filed lawsuits in a bunch of states, Indiana, Idaho, among others. Lucien Greaves, the co-founder of the Satanic Temple, is basically saying that he has to fight the system from within the system, and that's how the kind of strategy he's taking. He says in the article that we have to play the long game. You know, Christians, they spent generations doing this, and so that's the strategy he's taking. So I'm curious what you think, Cindy, as to like, will they be successful? Do you think that this is the best way to go about it?
Um, I don't know. I don't know. As I said just before we started the show, France is in the process right now of giving the right to an abortion and writing it down in the constitution, which is pretty great. But I wanted to specifically talk about a part of the article, and it talks about a group called Sovereign Citizens. It's a loose group of Americans who do not believe they are under the jurisdiction of the federal government and are not subject to U.S. law. And so I studied a little bit this group. I went to their website, um, and their uh, I hesitate between crazy and interesting group. In late 2021, Greaves received a message from that group. They informed him that he was to be deported from the US despite being a US citizen. And after finding a Zoom link for a sovereign citizen assembly meeting, Greaves crashed the meeting, and as a consequence, they put a $100,000 bounty on his head. So I went to their website, and the page detailing the bounty is still here. You can go right now and read it. And so let me just read you a tiny bit of it. So it says, on Monday, 276th day of the year of Yahweh 6023 at 722 UCT -6 or around. And that already tells you a lot about them. Young Earth creationists, Christians, etc. Douglas Messner attempted a coup d'etat by striving to hijack the National Assembly for the government of the United States of America, which they think they are, in the capacity as General Postmasters of the original General Post Office of 1775. All members were throwing threats with the intent to place fear into the American nationals so they would back away from their official duties and hand the government over the terrorist organization. So, yeah, they're classified as a terrorist group by the FBI. Um, but yeah, the bounty is still here. So Greaves had to move secretly, and so we were talking earlier about beliefs led by religious beliefs. That's what we get. Ellen, did you want to add something?
Yeah, yeah. So since June, I've had a lot of anxiety about the repercussions of Roe v. Wade being turned over. I did work with recovering from religion to get resources together for people to get access to abortion care or have their anxieties and questions answered, which gave me something to do about it. The fact that Lucien Greaves is doing something on the other side where he's actually trying to fight the law against the religious right want to take people's rights away, and and this is just the beginning of what irrevocable harm this can cause in the long run. And but the fact that he's fighting against it is actually giving me courage. I do appreciate how he expressed his frustrations about how the people at the Temple, including himself, are focused on the right things versus the people that are their detractors are focusing on the wrong thing. They're focusing on the fact that they use Satan as a symbol. And Lucien Greaves even said this gets to be really tedious because I think people aren't terribly invested in the outcome of the Satanic Temple's lawsuits. Because they just see the theatrics of it, they're not really paying attention of what they're actually trying to do because they're trying to protect freedoms for everybody
Mhm.
through the separation of church and state. And that also includes religious freedom. And I think though I love what they're doing, the image of the temple is bearing the message of what they're going to do. And Greaves mentioned in the article about the danger and the stress he has felt as the face of the Satanic Temple. He is constantly fighting an uphill battle. Um, I'm really excited because I get to meet him at Free Flow next month. So when I go, so I'm actually very excited about it, and I want to talk to him a little bit more about that in the future. And the Satanic Temple, to me, is an example of a microcosm of secularists fighting for civil rights and free expression in a country that actively pushes against those ideas. And since the religious right has infected the highest court in the land, it is even more imperative that secular groups fight to restore what the majority of Americans want. And I think that is where the focus should be. Rather, but I really appreciate that they're willing to, kind of fight the hard fight because they they are really fighting for that separation and using their advocacy and using Satan as a symbol of rebellion, which I love. But again, as he said, people lose. So, Cynthia, what do you think, honey?
Well, I think that unfortunately the message gets lost in the sauce because of the whole symbolism utilizing Baphomet as their symbol, right? You have the head of a goat in a man's torso with the goat portion at the bottom, and then instantly, especially with people who happen to be extremely like Christian or theistic leaning, and also on the right, get triggered by the symbol, but completely loses the messaging behind why we're using the symbol in the first place. I think that I mentioned on a podcast in the past, like, do you understand that if you are a Christian, and I lived as a Christian for almost 40 years of my life, so I get it, that you actually display when you display a cross, you are displaying the capital punishment of your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I mean, do you understand that? And do you really think that that is okay? Like, would you, like, say for instance, if your mother or your father was like gone through capital punishment, would you actually use the symbol of that, so say that you love your mother and father? I don't think so. So that in of itself is an issue that one has to actually go through when they are looking at symbols, iconography, things of that nature. But but one of the things that I do applaud is their particular advocacy when it comes to what they're doing in order for them to try to get back into um, really talking about separation of church and state. And one of the things that I wanted to point out, and then Jordan, I want you to chime in after this. you know, there's this whole thing that they're specifically trying to do is use the system in order for them to actually get change. And usually people are wanting to go and say, hey, we need to work outside of the system in order for us to affect change. And the thing about it is I have a friend that says government is the game and politics is how you play it. And I remember specifically in an article him saying that, let me see if I can find it. He said, I get messages from people denigrating us for taking legal action to assert our rights, saying you can't change the system from within the system. And I keep asking them, what the fuck do you think you just saw happen? That's what we did. And I totally agree with this tactic. I think that in order for us to be able to change anything as far as like, as far as Roe v. Wade concerned, you're going to need legislation. If you talk about lately, I saw that in Congress, after the GOP took charge, they disbanded the congressional committee that talked about civil rights for voting rights, and you're seeing this happen over and over again. So voting matters, using your voice matters, actually working within the system to change things that you don't like matters. And I appreciate the Satanic Temple actually doing that. But when he says that, I am curious to know, especially with the wake of the Christian nationalists and them actually getting laws, pushing things that they want to get forward done. Jordan, what is your take on this?
Well, I was kind of torn when I was reading this article because, on the one hand, I really appreciate the effort that they're going for, and obviously, I support their goals. And it's clever using kind of the tools of the enemy against the enemy, not to everybody who's religious, but obviously, this was an effort of the religious right over many decades, and they're using the language and tools of religion to try to influence the state, and that's a good thing. On the other hand, I would love to live in a world where we didn't have to put on the cloak of religion in order to enact change. Like this is it, Roe v. Wade was such a popular it had what 60-70% support across the board, which like nothing has that level of support. And so the fact that we have to play this game almost in order to get this extremely popular thing to work is extremely disappointing. But I fully agree with what you said, Cynthia, that ultimately, if we all work together, ultimately the votes are what are going to change this. If we, what do politicians care about? They care about power. And the way they stay in power is by getting voted in. And so if we stop them from getting voted in, then that's the way we're going to do it. So about to toss it over to you, Helen. I'm really interested what your take is on this, and what do you think? Like, how do you think they should move the ball forward?
I think that their public persona is a double-edged sword because it definitely gets eyeballs on them when they do dramatic displays of protests against things like against abortion, against queer rights, and they do public rituals, which definitely gets them in the news and definitely get a response, which is fantastic because you want that attention to go there. But again, as he said, the messages get lost in the theatrics. I think it's a very hard balance for what the Satanic Temple is doing. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, well, but he does a lot of interviews, and he is the public face for the Satanic Temple, and he got invited on Fox News. So, his face is out there, and he speaks up, and maybe out of like the millions of viewers watching Fox News, and he appears and he starts talking about the separation of church and state and what they're actually doing. And then if even 5 people are like, oh, I understand, and they start doing a little bit of research on what the Satanic Temple is doing, okay, I kind of want that. So it's really difficult, but at this point with Roe v. Wade being turned over, I'm kind of not going to be very picky about who's going to be taking up the mantle and fighting for equal rights. So, and for this barbaric law to be forced upon us, and now people that can bear children are scrambling and trying to figure out what they're going to do. At this point, I understand the frustrations, but also at the same time, I'm not caring at this point right now because there are bigger fish to fry. That's the kind of way I look at it. What do you think, Cindy?
I think you're muted.
Yeah, from the outside, I have a kind of a different perspective. I don't want to diminish his work because we haven't insisted enough on this, but the article uh, talks in length about the stigma he's facing for his engagement. He, as we said, he had death threats. He has to move. He had to move. His This took a heavy toll on him, and I want this to be said on record. On the other hand, I think that the image that the general public in the US has about the Satanic Temple is a make-believe religion to attack um, other religions. And until this image doesn't go away, I'm afraid they won't be able to go very far unless they have very good lawyers. But that's a different topic.
Different lawyers are just different sentiments of society in of itself because you know, let's just face it, the symbolism that's behind the iconography of Satan is very triggering, especially to theists. But you know, before we just wrap up and go on to our next segment, I just wanted to just say that, in my humble opinion, to look at the efforts of the Satanic Temple and to see that if they will make a change or not, one must consider that as much as we try to promote amiable discourse, to come to proper understanding, that is not the commitment to every person or group. And I think that that's something that was very much so displayed when we started to see different laws that popped up before and after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And so I believe that sometimes circumvention is absolutely necessary, but you know, I think that the Satanic Temple utilizing what they can do um, within the sphere of politics is usually the way to go. Um, I wish them luck because as a person with uterus, I am very I'm very invested in this particular issue.